I'm Asger. You can ask me anything. Today I'm going to answer this question. Can you have too much empathy? If I could go back in time and ask my own 25-year-old self this question, I think I would answer with a resounding no. You cannot have too much empathy. In fact, society would be better across the board if people had more empathy. I mean, on a societal level, I think I would probably still agree with that. I think life would be easier for most of us if more people had a higher degree of empathy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the individual benefits more from just having more empathy. First of all, let's just agree on what we understand by empathy. One of the ways we could try to understand empathy is, of course, to look at people who don't have too much empathy. People with various types of autism typically struggle with empathy. Some of these people actually don't even have the capacity to feel empathy, at least not in the same sense as you and I do. These people need to learn, be taught, but I think it's fair to say that the empathy that these people learn, and you can learn it with an autism diagnosis, it is a 100% rationality-based empathy. It's not like an intuitive understanding, or maybe rather an intuitive feeling of empathy. Now, so just to define empathy real quick, empathy is two things that work in tandem constantly. One is an intuitive, emotional feeling that you look at another person, listen to them, and then you get some sort of vibe about their emotional state. That just happens automatically for the vast majority of us, at least. Then there's a second type of empathy, which is a rational, logical type of empathy. You're talking to someone you aren't really feeling, you're not getting a vibe, but you can use your rational mind to determine that there is a high probability that this person is sad because we just spoke about their deceased spouse or something like that. There is a higher probability that right now they're feeling sadness. But what I want to call empathy here is the combination of both of these concepts and capacities. So as a young adult, I realized that I had a very high degree of empathy. People told me as well directly. But it wasn't until I started working in social psychiatry many years back that I realized that it's not always beneficial to have a lot of emotional empathy. So initially I would observe how many of my co-workers seem to have very little empathy. Now this is of course sort of an occupational hazard. We hear it from police officers and morticians and people who just generally work with very challenging groups of people or in very challenging or rough circumstances. These people typically tend to find some sort of way to deal with it that can seem extremely morbid to people who aren't involved in this type of work. And sometimes they can even come across as straight up anti-empathetic. Now, when I started working in social psychiatry, I was sort of forced to think about my own empathy and how I interacted with other people. And I would very often find myself in situations where one of our clients, young adults, would be very frustrated. Sometimes they would be angry, sometimes they would be aggressive, sometimes they would... there are many extreme circumstances, and of course I can't share any specific details due to concerns of confidentiality, but I can say that I would often get a very positive reaction from these clients because they felt that I understood them. Many of these clients also came from broken homes and had some really tough and rough upbringings, and their moral standards weren't always equal to those that I grew up with, which is you don't lie to other people, you don't take blatant advantage of other people, you don't manipulate others to get what you want, essentially. But many of the clients I worked with in social psychiatry, they didn't really hesitate to take advantage of someone, even though they liked that person, in this case me, and they could tell that this person actually really understands me. So approximately 2 years into this job I had in social psychiatry, a new co-worker started working there. He and I both had what you could call philosophical inclinations, I guess. We would really have some great dialogues where we questioned each other's motives, and it was sort of a joint self-improvement effort. I would criticize aspects of his behavior, he would do the same thing, and I remember one day he pulled me aside and he asked me, Asger, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. And he said, I've noticed that when people come and ask you to help them with something, our clients and co-workers, you always just drop whatever's in your hands and start helping them right away. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's true. That's me. That's exactly what I do. Is there anything wrong with that? My initial understanding was just that that's a good thing, isn't it? Then I started thinking about it and I started noticing my own behavior. I remember this one day I was doing some office work. There was a lot of documentation in this job. I was writing some stuff down that I had to finish before my shift ended. One of the clients came along and said, oh, Asger, could you, I'm having this issue with, some formula that needed to be filled in or something like that. And I was just about to say, sure, let's go. Let me come right along and help you with this thing. But then I realized, but I'm actually in the middle of something right now. And then I told the person, hey, give me 5 to 10 minutes and I'll be right with you. And the person said, sure, no problem. And I realized, okay, I didn't even get a negative reaction. I get to finish my first task and help this other person. This seems to be the way to go. I may actually have overlooked something in the past that I was unaware of. And after this episode, I really just started noticing this happening in all sorts of situations. And I remember this day, I came home from work and I'd really been thinking about this, focusing on it. And I would usually, in this period of my life, I would come home, my ex-wife, my then wife, would say, hey, from the living room, and I would say, hey, and then I would make a sandwich for myself and for her. But today, I went out in the kitchen, and I made the first sandwich, and then I realized, she can make her own damn sandwich. Why am I making her a sandwich? I'm a pleaser, right? Because that's sort of the conclusion I arrived at. I am a people pleaser, and it's way too much. I'm doing myself a disservice. I am giving people way more than I have to. And I'm not necessarily helping neither myself nor them by doing so. So I walked into the living room with my sandwich, and I just remember this disappointed look at my ex's face. And she asked me, didn't you make one for me? And I was like, no, I didn't. You could make your own sandwich. And I told her my reasoning behind it. But I caught myself in that situation, and I realized, okay, it would have taken 10 seconds of extra effort maybe to make 2 sandwiches. And this is my wife we're talking about at the time. That's probably a situation where it does make sense to go the extra mile or the extra foot, maybe in this case, and just make another sandwich. But let me just take a step back from all of this and say that I caught myself. I actually had to realize that I was too empathetic. I would be guided too much by my empathy, because I really just saw this raw emotional empathy as a positive thing. End of story, period. But it's not always a positive thing. It can also sort of be hard to, it's not that I walk that much around on Skid Row here in LA, but sometimes when I go downtown, it can be hard to see these homeless people and just see these people suffering. And I don't know their backstories. I'm sure some of them brought it on themselves in some sense, but I don't know that. I'm just getting an emotional reaction by looking at them. But what I did when I realized, okay, it's actually not a good thing for me personally to be guided so much by my empathy as I've been thus far up until this point. This took place in my late 20s. So I had to stop doing that. I had a period of time, the adjustment period, I guess, after realizing this is a problem. I need to turn it down a bit, where I would say no to just about anything, and I would not help people that I would have normally helped. I would still explain to them, I understand your situation, I see it from your side, but I'm not going to help you, because I need to stick to the number 1 rule of first aid, which is, if you don't save yourself, you cannot save anyone else. So I actually think it's fair to say these days that we should all try to find some healthy balance in our empathy. There's very few things that rubs me the wrong way as when I watch a person just being completely unsympathetic or unempathetic to another person's situation. I really don't like seeing that, because I think it's scary in a sense. We live in this highly complex social network world where we all constantly interact with each other. If I see people who just exhibit zero empathy, that's always a major red flag to me. Those are not the kind of people I'm attracted to. But at the same time, I have to accept that sometimes in business, in love, in life, you have to look out for yourself, because it is true. I mean, the first rule of first aid is actually true. If you don't save yourself, you won't be able to save anyone else. So I think there is a balance to be found in this. And I think a simple way we could do this is to just ask a friend or a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend, just ask people you know, hey, do you think that I'm an empathetic person? Have you ever thought that I was being too empathetic or not empathetic enough? That would be really interesting, right? And I would love to hear, actually, if you guys have any anecdotes, a situation where too much or too little empathy had a negative result. I would love to hear about that. But it's hard, right? Something else I just want to say, that it's clear that most people have an innate, inherent capacity for just this emotional empathy. But I also think it's fair to say, based on my own experiences, that you can turn that dial down at least a little bit, or you can turn it up. I mean, it seems to me that every 5 or 10 years there's a new wave of, sort of in the scientific community, but also in the New Age community, where, oh yeah, now it's like in vogue to be an empath or something like that. I don't think that we should just uncritically embrace that. In some jobs, in many jobs, probably it probably is helpful to be an empath or to be highly empathetic. But even in those jobs where you deal with other people, I mean, I certainly don't think that we should just uncritically say that we should all strive to have more empathy. And I mean, I'm even feeling weary just hearing myself saying these words, because I want the world to be a more empathetic place. I want us to have a better understanding of each other's, even across political and ideological divides. I think that's very important. But I think for some people, and this is probably the main point I want to say, yes, for some people, especially people who interact and work with other people on a daily basis, for those people, they need to try and check themselves every now and then and to see, is my dial set to the correct empathy level? Am I doing myself and or my clients or pupils or students or whatever it may be a disservice by being too empathetic or having too little empathy, perhaps in some cases? Anyways, let me know what you think, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. It is completely free, and you'll see me again tomorrow. I'm Asger. You can ask me anything, and don't hesitate to do so in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Cheers. Whoa.